welcome LabWare President and CEO, drumroll, Vance Kershner. Welcome, Vance. We'd like to start with the sense of your Highlands. So we'll just start with a couple questions. Can you tell us about your corner of the community and what some of your favorite spots and places and views in the neighborhood?
Sure. So I can't think of a better place to live than the Highlands. It's really a place that is hard to replicate anywhere else, and certainly in the U.S. for sure for me. And the reason for that is because I think it's really nice to be close to my office for one thing. So I'm at 3 Mill Road, and so I don't have to fight with a lot of traffic to get to work every day. It's also just beautiful. I mean, it's the most. I think Kentmere Parkway is one of the most beautiful places to live, not just in Wilmington, but pretty much anywhere. The neighbors and the people are so nice. There's just so many attributes about it. And of course, there's, options to get to anything you need. You don't have to go more than a half a mile to get anything.
Yeah, I would add the calculus for me, Vance, when I moved here just about a year plus ago, was the access to 95 and all the airports and the sort of ease of, to your point, the lack of friction and kind of getting out and about in the world at large.
I certainly agree with that 100%. I was answering more just specifically about Highlands, but I will make a bigger point, and that is I'm in the software business. And so, my business doesn't have a need to be in a specific location. And so when I started the company, I really thought about, where in the world do I need to locate this? And I was living here, but I said, this is really, I wasn't in the Highlands, but I was over in Rockford Park. I said, this is the place to be because, you have a huge market on the eastern seaboard that's accessible very easily, either through planes or through trains. But also Europe, it was available. So when you look at the world, being on the East Coast of the U.S. is the best place to reach markets. And the drive to the Philly airport is shorter for us than it is for people that live in the greater Philadelphia area. I did think about that strategically, and it really is a good place to be.
Yeah. So you grew up, if I understand correctly, north of Philadelphia in Huntington Valley. Can you give us a sense of what it was like to be a kid there, let's say 1971, 72? So if I got this right, you're getting keys to a car, right? About that time.
Yeah. So Huntington Valley was, it's a suburb of Philly, and it was probably pretty representative of a lot of the suburbs of Philly that when you got out of the city limits. So it was literally right on the city limits. And it had a real mix of, there was just, people that lived there and went to work. A lot of them took the train to work down in Center City, Philadelphia. But there was also still industrial work going on. So there was a number of, things that were happening in the community that you don't really see so much today, where they're actually making things and stuff like that. That just kind of has gone away. For most of the places where people live in America, but I got to see that, and so kind of along that vein, my father was he made pretzels, so he had a pretzel factory in Philly, Philadelphia soft pretzels, and so I got to spend a lot of my time working there. I also spent a lot of my time. This is where I started my entrepreneurial stuff. Was that when I was a kid in 8th grade actually? I started a lawn mowing business. So I ended up with about 30 customers. Around the neighborhoods around me. So
that's no joke for that.
So it was a busy time because I was always. I didn't want to sit around. I never watched TV. That might relate to Dennison because I know his family didn't have, he was big on not getting sucked up into TV. So I was always looking for things to do.
That's interesting. I'm already starting to see your entrepreneurial spirit already at some age. So you graduated U of D with honors in mechanical engineering in 1978. And so I guess, what was your early role model or champion? Who inspired you?
So what inspired me to go to UD in the first place was I had an uncle who worked for DuPont, and he was a chemical engineer, and he was the most educated person, in our family, and I had spent a lot of time with him, and so I was really impressed by that. And as I was thinking about, just what to do after high school, I was always hands-on with things and always making things, fixing things. I wanted to go, I was interested in what Uncle Bob had to say about it. And, and so I chatted with him, and he said, well, if you want to go to University of Delaware, you can come live with me. And so I did. So while I went to UD, I didn't live on campus. I lived out in Kibblesville with my aunt and uncle. And that was a great experience, so because I got to see a world I otherwise wouldn't have understood what it meant, because being an engineer, I mean, he was doing that every day. And so we talked about it. And so I understood better what it really meant than from the perspective of someone who's, doesn't have any idea and will learn it after school. I kind of learned, a lot about it as I was going to school.
Yeah, what would have otherwise been sort of an abstraction, right? The idea of what does the day-to-day really look like, you got to sort of interact with on the day-to-day.
Correct. It's effectively like it would have been if I was his son, I mean, so that was really good. They didn't have kids, and it was really good, and win-win.
Yeah. So
I fixed all his stuff that broke for him.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So speaking of fixing things, your first new car, if I have this right, is a 1973 Plymouth Roadrunner, right? And I heard in one of your interviews, I love this detail, that your goal was to crack 100 miles per hour and get air every day. And the interviewer goes, what do you mean by get air? And you're like, go airborne, which I love, right? So I'm interested in how would you describe for us those instants when you're going 100 miles per hour and or getting air? Like, what's happening in that instant for you, Vance?
So first of all, when I want to just point out that when I said that, I meant it. Okay, so that was a daily occurrence.
Oh, I had no doubt.
yeah, absolutely. So, and I still have that car, and it's restored. So where we lived had the opportunity within, I would say, a half mile of the house. Well, two of them were a half mile of the house. One was a mile from the house, where you had an opportunity to get airborne. So that was kind of like set itself up, because if you're coming to where I lived, almost every angle you came in on it, whatever vector you were following, there was going to be some big over the top hill, or something that was a little hump that was there, that because it was going over some little tiny bridge, or the biggest one would be that you're going down this big steep hill and there's railroad tracks, and then it drops down some more. Yeah. So I did that every day, and that doesn't mean I was reckless, because I was very careful. It was one of the things that I think that people at my age were always getting in tickets and getting in trouble, and all. Well, I didn't, and a lot of it was because I chose my moments.
Right.
So I was a very careful, safe driver, and I wasn't going to go do something like that if there's other people around or there's other cars, But so I had a lot of opportunity, and I just thought it was a challenge.
It was a calculated risk. So I did catch that you had restored the vehicle, and if I'm not mistaken, not that I'm checking out your driveway, but is that what's out front? That beautiful orangish red number?
No, not right now. It's not. It's not right out front at this moment, but it's in town.
Yeah.
And, yeah. It's
well, is that still a goal? Was my follow up?
Yeah. So I restored the car, and then just to give a little bit more perspective on what was going on, I decided that I thought it would be really cool to also make a new version of that. And that's what took me to Vegas for the last week, is that, I work with guys locally here, We said, well, what would we do if we were going to invent this car again in modern times? And so I have multiple Roadrunners. I have the original Roadrunner, and now we've created this one would be, well, if the factory was going to come out with this today, what would it be like? And we built it. And
what kind of, for the layman, what kind of differences, what kind of gaps did you close?
So the main, a lot.
Yeah,
the original car was the original Roadrunner, for the day was a quick car, and it was about 275 horsepower. And the new 73 is 1,000. It's actually 1,200, but they call it 1,000. And so first of all, it has a lot more power. Now, if you have a car that has a lot more power in a design that was from the 70s, you need to change it to be able to accommodate not twisting the frame and all that. So when you look at the car, you look and you see a 73 Roadrunner, but everything technology-wise is completely different. So it's got a full chassis under it, much more modern suspension. It looks like a factory car. And in fact, when I was at SEMA, the SEMA is the largest exhibit in the U.S. regarding anybody that has anything to do with making parts for cars or car manufacturers. That was last week. I had the car there. It was the most popular thing there.
I bet.
When I was there, what people were blown away with was they said, "Is this a new car that Dodge is going to come out with?" Because when you open the door and you look at it, and it was all modern. So we had a modern car that was actually, a 73.
I love it because you're like, you've got the classicness, but then you've got, the modern underneath the hood, which is pretty cool because it's a perfect balance.
That resonated with a whole bunch of people there. That's why we were so popular, because, it's got the satellite radio and the navigation and, all of those things, and, yet it's a very cool car, but it's got launch control and, the paddle shifters and all of that.
All the amazing modern amenities, but the classic charm. So I love kind of your techie spirit. And so DuPont to start your own company, LabWare, which I don't know if I can say this in one mouthful, but you develop and implement laboratory information management systems and electronic laboratory notebooks, which sounds very impressive. I guess, what was your inspiration? That's pretty amazing that you came up with your own product.
Thanks. That's a good question. So from the beginning of time, when I was cutting grass and all as a kid, I always wanted my own company. And so it wasn't really my choice to go to work for DuPont. They came to University of Delaware and said to me, "You're coming to work for us." And so I did. I've never been on a job interview in my life. They sought me out, and so I went to work for them. But that was in like 1978, and the whole bureaucracy around how these big companies operate and all that, in my opinion, really was over too much. It was DuPont at that time was like probably one of the most powerful companies in the world.
Yeah.
But the politics that was going on, the way that it operated, I didn't think was really conducive to what we at that time would call entrepreneurship. What entrepreneurship was a term that was coined back then to mean how to be an entrepreneur within a company, and you really couldn't do that in DuPont. So that was something that I respected all the people that I worked with and everything, but I always wanted to do my own thing. So in parallel to working for DuPont, I was looking at the market, and I understood the market through the lens of somebody who worked for the DuPont. I mean, I didn't have a real worldview at that point in time, but I could see that there was a need for automation around how you could interface with laboratory instruments and other computer systems to be able to have results delivered in a timely manner so you could make better decisions around any kind of lab testing. So I set out to solve that problem. And again, I had my day job, and then I had my job, outside of DuPont. And I did. I solved that problem. DuPont heard about what I was doing, and their first reaction was, well, that's our technology. Did you read your employment agreement? I said, yeah, I read my employment agreement. And so the upshot of all of that was that little me is fighting with the council while an employee of the most powerful corporation in America at the time. And I won. They recognized that I'd done it on my own time, using my own equipment. I didn't use any intellectual property or anything like that from DuPont. And they became my first customer.
Wow. Way to make that a success story.
What a great origin story. You got to love telling that.
Yeah.
So that's one, I want to pivot to a different kind of confidence, which is kind of creative confidence, the ability to ideate and create and make connections. How do you cultivate creativity in yourself and in your company? And how do you prioritize? Because you must, I don't know, I find that you just can't execute on all the ideas you got, right? So how do you interrogate and kind of prioritize the ideas that come to you?
That's a great question. First of all, I would say that when it comes to doing new things, whether it's in the company or it's outside the company, I prioritize things I don't know anything about. And the reason that I do that is because I want to learn from doing something.
Yeah.
I don't just want to do something. I want to learn from it. And a way for me to learn is to go and do things that are far flung from what my daily job would be. And even in my daily job, which I'm defining as working for LabWare, and you've recognized that I'm the
get a few hats.
I'm the owner and the CEO and all that stuff. But I don't look at numbers. I don't sit there and it's a global company. We've got offices in 27 countries around the world. I spend my time problem solving and trying to invent new things at the tech level. So I look at my lens and my interest is in creating new things. I want to make the world a better place. And, it's not through making a bunch of money. It's about by, innovating and doing things that people haven't done. So there's a saying that was in my time was popular that was take the road less traveled.
Right.
I prefer to take the road that's never been traveled.
Yeah.
To me, that's where my, so when you ask me what do I gravitate towards? That's what I gravitate towards. I want to just tackle things and do stuff people haven't done before, because then that's the way you're going to learn the most. And that's how you can have the most impact on the world. And I want to leave here meaning this world, in a better place. That's what I'm about. I want to, from the scientific background and engineering background, there's this concept of entropy. And what entropy is about is that, that naturally systems go, they go to disorder. So entropy increases. So, things fall apart. Okay. If you don't do anything, things fall apart. So in order to, correct that, you have to put energy into it. So, houses are going to fall down, for example, if you just let it sit for, hundreds of years, whatever, any system will do that. So I am on a mission to fight entropy, to try to, bring back and things that were historic that I want to preserve, and, and then create new systems that will be hard to destroy.
I love it. It's like the constant need for continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Really amazing. So you're a leader. You lead hundreds of people at LabWare, and you also lead an amazing team at Goober's, which was one of my favorite restaurants. So what attributes do you look for when you're creating your kind of culture of change, or collaborators that you like to work with? And how has your kind of vision of kind of the people that you work with evolved over time?
So, first of all, I think that everything in business is about people. There's that's certainly the most important thing, and the people are your best asset. That's kind of people throw that away very easily, but they are. Mm-hmm. So in any business, it's the people that matter. And so, what you want to do is you want to try to create a culture and an environment around whatever you're doing, wherever it is in the world, where the people want to be in your circle. They want to be there. And so how do you do that? Well, number one is you have to respect them. You have to try to have a really good lens or look at the world through their eyes to say what are their interests and priorities, and mostly that means that you communicate with them and you talk to them, and you don't get on your high horse and look down at people. So when I created LabWare and coming out of DuPont, the organization chart is a big deal. And then because we're working in industries where people audit us because of GMP and all that sort of stuff with pharma, people would come in, they look at the org chart, and they were very confused. And the reason they were very confused was because they'd see the people, and then they'd see me at the bottom. I wasn't at the top, I was at the bottom, because my job is to help those people be successful in what they're doing. They're not there to take orders from me. I'm there to facilitate them being able to do what they need to do to be successful.
That's awesome. You recognize expertise, right? You can't be a specialist in everything you do, and you've got to pull those people up and elevate them. So we have lots of questions. And so Pierre, would you like to come off mute and ask your first question?
Sure. If you hear some chanting in the background, it's my 3-year-old son running around the house. So excuse me if that happens. But my question is a kind of offbeat one that'll probably put most people in the room to sleep. But you mentioned being in the software business and around the time you started your company. So my question is, how have you separated the platforms you built your services on from the services you provide? Because the platforms themselves, the tools, whether object-oriented programming languages, whether COBOL, they evolve over time. And at the same time, you're actively providing services and business functions to organizations who are your clients. How have you decoupled that so that you could continue to evolve over time? Because in this time span you're talking about, that's a long life to be able to provide that many services to companies. And those software decisions are huge, the platforms that you build them on.
First thing I want to say is that was an incredibly important question. That was the key to the whole business that I built. And I could speak for hours on this subject. So I'll try to boil it down and keep it somewhat simple. So the first thing is that I saw. Let me just preface this by saying, at the time that I entered the software, realm, was when we were going from mainframe computers into client server computing. So that was sort of the time at which I entered all of this. So we weren't talking about writing programs on green screens. We were talking about writing programs, within the PC realm, which at that time was primarily IBM PCs. And but I looked at the market, and I looked at, there was Apple and Microsoft, and I was really looking at, well, I need to do a couple things. I need to make sure that whatever the way that I approach the problem of developing the software, it has to be language independent. I cannot say I'm going to do it in Visual Basic because Microsoft controls that, and I don't know where that's going. I also was very aware of object-oriented programming. And I wrote the first commercial application in object-oriented programming.
Wow.
That was my product. So, but the key was I need to have it be that all of the rules and logic of how it works are either configuration driven, because you're going in tables in a database and choosing options, or if you have anything that's quote a language, it's something which is stored in the database, and you never want to customize anything. So, like I said, I could spend hours on this, but the key is that I have my first customers are still my customers because I can upgrade their systems, and it's push button upgrade, and we can change things without the technology is changing all the time. In fact, we've developed, and I was a key part of this, developed mobile technology where I can run code that I wrote 30 years ago on my phone.
On your flip phone?
It's your previous observation, Linz, right? The Roadrunner with the Sirius.
It is, and but the key is not so. That's not the way people think about technology.
Yeah.
I think about it as the long term. I want the company to be here for 100 years. I want my customers to be here for 100 years. I want to be able to not have to throw everything away every 5 or 10 or 15 years and start over again. And so, that was a very, very, very good question, because it's the heart of my success in business with LabWare and a lot of other things, is that you have to do things, and it goes back to the entropy thing. You have to be able to do things which are long lasting and have a path forward where nobody can take you out, and upgradable.
Thank you. That was actually a great answer. I've only been in the industry about 20 years, and I've seen even large conglomerates almost be forced out of making money because the things they developed on were co-licensed by other companies, and then they extort them for money later, and you essentially pay or don't play at all. So it's great that you were way ahead of this, because it could be crippling for any business, big or small. So thank you.
And I was not going to let that happen.
All right, so it looks like we actually are going to switch gears to a car question. So,
sure.
Tim, I don't know if you want to come off mute. I tried to unmute you, but I'll just read his question. So he obviously really enjoys Goober's Diner. It's the best part was touring the garage. Can you tell us about your collection, and what are your top 5 cars that you own?
So almost every time somebody goes into the garage, they say, well, what's your favorite car? And I say, what's your favorite kid?
Oh, you can't pick. Yeah.
You can't answer that question. And so the cars are so different. So the theme of the garage is American cars. And the oldest car is 1899 and all the way through to modern times. We have a little bit of a gap in the 80s and 90s because we didn't have some great American cars. But but the key here is that I don't have a favorite. Everything in the collection has something unique about it, and something which separates it, from the other stuff. And so that's, so no favorites. And again, the theme is American cars, but a really key thing about these is that they all run. So, I said the earliest is 1899, it runs. So, we want to make sure that, people don't just look at something and that you don't just have something which you stick into a garage as a museum, but it's actually something that's functional and that you can understand how it works and talk to people about it. So that's what interests me the most about, all of the cars in the collection.
Hey, Vance, I don't know if you can hear me, but thanks very much. The garage is fantastic. It's so special to be able to have that accessible to all of us and to see these treasures. We really enjoy it. I can't wait. My wife and I were there recently, and we won through it, and it was fantastic. I right away was photographing some cars and sending them to my kids, saying, "You guys got to come. One, we got to come for breakfast because it was fantastic, but then two, they want to see these cars because my kid's a motorhead, and he really would enjoy that. And thank you for sharing that with us. It's it's a little Americana, and it's a real treasure. So thank you.
Thank you for the comment. And I've got to say that I do have a motive there, and that is that I want the people, these younger people, to recognize how the history of what has happened in this country. And as I mentioned, that oldest car, the 1899, I want to talk to the guys and the guys and gals that come through and say, hey, that was built by a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Wow. So they weren't watching video games, they were inventing stuff. So hopefully, some of that will rub off on the younger generations too, that, it's about making things.
Yeah. Hands-on. Yeah.
Hands-on.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. We've got two last questions. One, this can be a rapid round. What is your favorite menu item at Goober's? And then Dennison has a question about the blueberry farm.
Sure. So as far as you just asked me what's my favorite car, and I say the same, the menu.
Yeah.
I always
it's the Belgian waffles. You already know.
Yeah, my biggest thing is I go through the menu all the time because there's not one thing on there. So whenever I go in there and I'm getting food or whatever, I always make sure. And the same thing at Buckley's, I always get something different because I want to make sure that it's still sort of on point and it's working. And I think that you shouldn't, if you're trying to have other people come into your place, you want to make sure that there's good stuff for everybody to have their favorite. But I don't want to be focused on what I like. I want to be focused on making sure there's stuff for other people to like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my question is, Vance, I don't have as much trouble choosing my favorite. Well, I have trouble choosing my favorite child, but I don't have any trouble choosing my favorite fruit. And every day I have blueberries. So I love to hear how your blueberry farm in South Africa is doing and what sort of innovations you've done there.
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm actually going to be going there next week. Because we want to look at the next phase of the operations. But what Dennison is referring to is that, I have a footprint I have footprints all around the world, but I have a particular footprint when in Africa. When I was a kid, and like a small child, my parents, when you had dinner and you didn't want to finish your dinner, they would say, think of all the starving children in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, that was what they said. And I pondered that as a kid. I'm like, well, okay. So what does that mean? Because if I don't finish my dinner, how the hell am I going to send it to Africa? And that's how you first thought about it. But then I realized that what it really meant was that the continent of Africa had a lot of people who were really suffering, and it wasn't by any choice of their own. And it was very difficult for them to be able to, quote, rise out of that situation. So what it really meant was, you're here and you got options in America, and you're not thinking about the people in the rest of the world who don't have as easy as you. And so, you should be thinking about what their needs are. And that resonated with me. So I have a footprint in Africa. And one of the things that I've been involved with is with some partners of mine that are the guys that actually do it, we created a blueberry farm out in the middle of nowhere, which is like one of the biggest in the world. And so the purpose of it was to be able to uplift the community.
Mhm.
So we employ during the harvest season 600 women from communities that have never had a job, and they're the pickers. So it's a state-of-the-art operation, and it's ISO certified, and it's in the middle of nowhere, all surrounded by wild animals and all this stuff. And it's an investment into really trying to uplift the community and take people to a place where they wouldn't otherwise be. And this echoes back to my statement. I want to leave the world in a better place. And this is an opportunity to do that. And so it's going well. We have a couple challenges now around just freezes in the winter. I really wish there'd be some global warming to help warm things up, because we're having to heat it up for a couple weeks. But all kidding aside, no, it's an amazing operation. The people there are amazing, and when people go through it, they can't believe that you've got this state-of-the-art operation, which you would view as state-of-the-art in the U.S. For example, what do I mean by that? 70 pictures are taken of every blueberry.
Wow.
So in the systems that are running, packaging this stuff, there's 70 pictures that are looking for blemishes and figuring out this one's a discard, this one's a keeper. So it's state of the art. I mean, this is like, anyway, long answer. So we're taking technology and we're putting investment, but the real reason is to help the community.